Although many attitudes have changed since the 1970s, Jen's emotional story proves that domestic abuse is still very much a reality for many women and children. The types of abuse may vary, but the fact that women can still be physically hurt or feel threatened, controlled, or scared in their own homes is something that needs to change. Society's perception of men who abuse their partners is taking a step in the right direction, however, with police now working with women's groups to convict those who choose to control with their fists.
I think certainly I've been in the police 31 and a half years, and I've seen a huge change in how certainly police deal with domestic abuse incidents. Historically, what we've done is we've managed these incidents and managed victims of domestic abuse. And what we've done is we've actually dealt with the consequences rather than dealing with the problem. So over the years, that's the biggest change I've seen, that police officers have got a clearer defined role, and their role is to stop domestic abuse and to arrest the perpetrators and allow the victims of domestic abuse to be supported by the actual experts in that field, and that is Women's Aid and other groups like that. The crimes themselves in terms of domestic abuse that we see really shake me up sometimes, because they vary from, at the very top scale, domestic abuse homicide, down to serious sexual crime, to rapes within a domestic setting, to all sorts of crimes of violence, and as you mentioned earlier, mental torture where people are, they can't live their life. Sometimes those are the most difficult ones for the police to investigate, because a lot of occasions we go there, we see things very much in black and white. If an assault's committed, we look at it as an assault. But if someone reported to the police that their previous partner sent them bunches of flowers, it's difficult sometimes for a police officer to understand that and the whole picture of what's going on there. So again, that might be part of a chain of events that leads to an abusive charge that we may be able to prove, along with kind of stalking and harassment and that type of level of investigation. So what we need to be is open to all types of incidents and actually interpret them for what they are. And on occasions, we find it a lot easier to do that when we've got a wider range of partners to actually influence our decision making in that process.
Glasgow Women's Aid has too come a long way since its humble beginnings in the Gorbals 40 years ago, and now offers a wide range of services to support female victims and their children.
Obviously we've got more refuge provision than we had in the past, and we now do actually get some money from the Scottish Government and from the council. The quality of refuge accommodation is very good. There are workers who work very hard to maintain that. And when women and children do come into refuge, the psychological and practical support they receive is fabulous. But for a lot of people, they will never come into refuge. They may access the office for support in person or by phone, but they may not feel that they want refuge accommodation. We may not have the space. So for a lot of people, it's about recognising that they maybe don't get as full a service as they maybe require. In the 70s, there wasn't even any recognition really of this being a problem initially. Obviously now it is, everyone's aware that domestic abuse is an issue and it is a problem. It's been much further up the political agenda, there's far more publicity about it. But I would say that although it's great that there are resources like yourselves for women and children, nobody is really actually questioning why this happens and how we actually would go about stopping or trying to stop it happening. It's about, kind of damage limitation, if you like, rather than actually trying to prevent it in the first place.
But where does the problem stem from? David Cameron recently proposed legislation for an opt-in system for pornography. If enacted, it's hoped it will reduce consumption of X-rated material online, which could have an impact on how women are viewed in society.
And if we think about what leads to or creates a culture in which violence against women, of which domestic abuse is one part, of what makes that acceptable, I think we have to take a step right back and look at one of the big players around the normalisation of sexual violence, and that is pornography. And I think if we look at where young men, especially young men, look to find out information about sex, it's not necessarily being filtered. Pornography is a number one form of sex education. It's a poor, if not dangerous, form of sex education for young people. And I think we have to look at how we can interrupt the messages, the norms, the kind of ideas that are put out about pornography. I think we have to look at the role of pornography in creating a culture in which sexual violence is somehow accepted. And if it's not accepted, it's minimised. And it's not just sexual violence, as you say, it's domestic abuse and other elements of it. Pornography is the biggest propaganda machine. The messages that it puts out in our broader culture is about the role of women and the role of men. It places women in a subordinate position, no matter what anybody says. Women in pornography do not control the porn industry. So they do not control the messages that goes out. The messages are that sexual violence is somehow acceptable, that male dominance is the priority, that women are placed in a lesser position. And in order to treat someone with violence, in order to enact violence in someone, you have to have a degree of dehumanisation, of objectification. And where does those messages come from? They come very clearly from pornography.